Caro. Welcome
Hey,
to
hey.
Automate All the Things. We're so excited to have you.
Thanks for having me. I've watched quite a few of these, so it's really cool to be on the other side of it now.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm excited that maybe Automate All the Things helped you automate some of the stuff, but it feels like you are now
Absolutely.
a master and you've come back to teach us. So really appreciate you coming on.
Well, that's the thing, right? That even when you're a master of one thing, there's always a new tool and a new a tool adds automations or they add a new feature or whatever. So there's always a million things to learn
Exactly.
for sure.
And luckily for everyone, there are people like you coming to teach us and show us. But today I think I'm particularly excited about this because I've never done the basics of Zapier. I went straight into the most advanced stuff. So I've always wanted to do just like, hey, let's start from scratch. And so I'm so excited to have an expert like you teach us, the nuts and bolts of Zapier. And maybe that's a good place to start. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you run, what got you into Zapier. Give us that quick intro.
Yeah, sure. So I think first and foremost, I consider myself an ops person. So I've worked in operations for about 10 years now within tech. And before that, I was a web developer. So I was like that nerdy kid who taught herself to code. And that was really my entry point into tech. And now, I haven't written a line of code in years and could never be a developer. It's like the world has changed way too much. But I love operations, I love ops, and I love no code ops specifically. And all that we have all these tools now that allow us to do more with less. I've
Absolutely.
spent most of my career at smaller bootstrap companies, and so that was always really important to be able to do more with less and to do things faster and more efficiently. So that was kind of my entry point. I worked at a technology education company called Skill Crush for a few years, and that's really where I learned Zapier
Right.
and kind of how to automate some things that were just so manual and taking so much of my team's time. And then got more and more into using things to really kind of build products out of no code tools.
Right.
And so now I'm the general manager of Tech Ladies, which is the largest community of women in tech. So there's about 100,000 of us. And we offer education and support and community first and foremost. And we also partner with companies to help them hire more women in tech. And so a lot of, I think what we're going to talk about today are some of the processes
Right.
on the back end of that side of the business.
So 100,000 members, massive contribution to the community. But I think the most important question that folks watching today have is how many Zap tasks a month do you run with that community? It doesn't have to be a precise number.
Uh, yeah. Ooh. That's a really good question. I feel like I should totally know it, but I think I put it out of my head because I don't want to know it.
Right.
And actually, I think a lot of my Zaps now are spread out across a couple Zap accounts for various reasons. So I'm gonna say that we're definitely in the tens of thousands.
Wow. Okay. So it's not
uh,
even at a point where you're like, we could do this manually. It's at the point where you would not be able to run or do
yeah,
anything
no,
at your scale if it wasn't for, no code tools.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there's definitely some things in there that we could do ourselves. I like to think about Zapier in particular as kind of different categories of what are things that you can automate to get yourself out of busy work,
Mm-hmm.
and then what are things you can automate that maybe they don't take a lot of time, but they have a lot of human error,
Right.
and so you can reduce that. And then I think the third thing is kind of what can take your business to the next
Right.
level, right? And I think that's where we're really at with Tech Ladies, because using no code tools like Zapier and Airtable and Softer was really able to grow Tech Ladies to a 7-figure business.
Right.
And, really that was the game changer for us was I built a product with no code tools. And that allowed us to grow 100% quarter over quarter, 6 quarters in a row.
Yeah. So it's not even about what could we not do. It's what can we accomplish, right? And okay,
Yeah.
so I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. Caro, I would love for you
Okay.
to give us the 60 seconds on what is Zapier for someone who has listened to 7 minutes of this and said, I
Yeah.
still don't know what Zapier is. Give us the
Yeah.
pitch for it.
Yeah. So I think my simple pitch is that Zapier automates like actions so that you don't have to do them manually.
Right.
So I think at its simplest form, it's you tell Zapier when this happens, do this. So when someone fills out a form, add them to this spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm.
When someone buys this product, email them a link to that product.
Right.
And I think that's its most simple variation, but there's so much you can do with it.
Right.
You can build tasks and kind of if this, then that, and all these multi-step apps. And I think we're going to touch a tiny bit of that. But I think even if you're just using it at its most simplest form out of this, step A, trigger step B,
right.
Then you can still get so much power out of it.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's jump in here. So the theme of today is going to be if this, then that. If this happens, then do that. So let me go ahead and share my screen. We're kind of picking an example here that comes out of kind of, I wouldn't say your community, but is kind of walk us through. We won't do the interface. I'm here on Zapier.com. Maybe not start there. Let's start about high level. What are we trying to automate? What is the annoying thing we don't want to do or are incapable of doing?
Yeah, so we're gonna walk through a process that I had iterated over the course of 2 years on, and kind of do a pared back version of that. And so we're gonna start by making a Zap that saves a lot of work, particularly for the customer support people on my team who are supporting the companies who are trying to hire more women for their team. And so when they partner with us, we tell them all about the benefits and how great it is, and they're like, great, sign me up. There are a lot of things that come between sign me up and them making a hire. And so really we're automating that onboarding process. And so that's them telling us what plan that they want, us sending a contract and getting it signed, them receiving an invoice and paying that. And then really us tracking all of this in our project management tool of choice, which happens to be Airtable.
Okay.
So we're going to start with the very first step. I think sometimes you have these big processes.
Right.
And it gets overwhelming. So we're going to start very small. And what we've done on our side is ask new clients to fill out a really short form using Typeform.
Okay.
And so what I want to happen is that when clients fill out this Typeform and they tell me their name, their email, and what plan they want, I want to use that to send that information automatically to Airtable, where my team kind of tracks the clients we have that are pending.
Okay.
And so this is kind of our project management space where we always know kind of who's in play. And so this way, when someone fills out the form, you don't have to manually go check it. You don't have to wait for someone to check the email and get the Typeform notification. It's just always there and always up to date.
Okay.
That's where
So
let
me read back what I'm hearing, right? So your workflow is, I want to be a tech lady's customer, which means buying a certain sponsorship plan, which has, depending on what I pick, different prices. And then that first step is in Typeform saying, okay, I want this plan. My name is blah, blah, blah. This goes, hopefully your name is not blah, 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 but we can, no matter what your name is, doesn't matter. We want to go ahead and send that to Zapier, to Airtable, so that we have our CRM, right? So if folks aren't using Airtable, it's totally fine. And then from there, you want to say, okay, there's more we got to do. We got to do the contract. We're going to do the Stripe. We're going to try to get as far as possible. So our first step is that connection between Typeform and Airtable. So talk to me about, okay, let's go through it here. Let's go through the form. Is that a good start? Okay. So my name is Jeff. And then my jeff@gmail.com. And then I don't have that starter or pro. Those are my two kind of options. And then I want to go ahead and submit that. Okay, so let's go ahead and do I have a URL I could go to on Typeform? I'll just keep it so we could share.
Okay.
Here we go. And let's fill it out for real. Okay.
Yeah, and while you're doing that, I can say, so one of the reasons we use Typeform is just that it's pretty, and it tells you that it's less than a minute. It's very straightforward. And so it works well for us. And we actually have quite a few more options here, because the goal is to kind of streamline a lot of back and forth email around who should get the invoice, who should sign the contract, that kind of stuff. And so it's 6 or 7 questions. We've simplified that here. But I think that's another, room for improvement, to add some efficiency.
Yes.
But we're going to start with this simple version to keep it simple.
So I have submitted. So this data lives here, right? And Typeform is not your CRM, is what I'm hearing from you. your CRM
Correct.
is Airtable. And so we want to magically take
Yeah.
this anytime this is submitted and send it here. So I'm on Zapier. I've never seen this before. What is a Zap? What is Pure? What is Pierre? How do you say Zapier? Where are we going with this?
Zapier makes you happier.
Okay.
So that's how you say it.
Okay.
For everyone watching at home, I think there's a team Zapier too, but it's Zapier. And we're going to start by making a Zap. So a Zap is the task that you want done. So we're going to go to create Zap. And every Zap at its like simplest form has a trigger and an action.
Okay.
So the trigger is the first thing. So in this case, it's when someone fills out the Typeform. That's what kind of starts this Zap happening, running the task. So we need to say Typeform is going to be our app. Zapier has like, I don't know, thousands and thousands of apps. And so they work with almost everything. And thankfully, Typeform is one of them. So we'll click on Typeform. And if it's your first time using the tool, we'll have to set it up. But for here, right now, we're going to pick event. So event, every app has like a couple events. Usually it looks like Typeform just has one, and it's new entry, which works out because that's what we want. So when there's a new entry on this Typeform, that's going to be the trigger.
Okay, so let me read this back if I understand correctly. We're saying we have to select the app where something needs to happen, right? So we're saying when something happens in Typeform, then we're saying, okay, great. And Zapier is asking us, okay, what needs to happen in Typeform for this thing that we haven't yet built to do, right?
This is like the prerequisite for the action. So the trigger is like, what's got to happen for Zapier to take the action that we're going to tell it to do.
Okay, so so it's saying connect your Typeform account, which I haven't. So let me see if I'm able to do this.
So for the first time that you use any tool in Zapier, you'll have to connect your account.
Okay.
And then once you've
I don't read these things. I'm just like, yes.
I'm sure it's going to bite us in the butt later, but right now we're fine. We're saving time.
Okay.
And that's what this is about, right? Okay.
Okay, got it. So it's saying, okay, and then so here it's which form needs to be filled out for this Zap that we don't know what it does yet, needs to be filled out. Okay.
Exactly. So you click the form that we made. Zapier is just going to test the trigger to make sure that the connection works and that they can find the form and all of that. And so, if you're really bold, you can skip this step, but I think it's good to do so we can hit test trigger.
I'm not bold. I run a stream where I hope things work. And so I try not to be too bold. So what Zapier's done here is it's like went to the form and tried to find the most recent entry. So if you click on the little drop down that says entry A, there's only going to be entry A because we've only filled out this form once. But like if you were really testing this, you could fill it out a couple different times with like different plans and stuff. But we have this form, you can see that you filled it out. It's got all the information. This is basically all the information that Zapier has to play with in your automation. Got it.
So these are all the things that you can use later.
Okay. So this
name,
is saying
email, plan.
For this specific entry, we have this field which doesn't have a name, but we know that it's the first name, is Aron, and then the second field is email, and then the plan that user selected. There's like some metadata here around the form, like when was it submitted? What is the ID of this? Okay. So far,
I think some people get intimidated by this because it looks like a little bit of gobbledygook, but like at the end of the day, like you don't even really need to look at this. Like it can be helpful to be like, oh, what other information is it passing that I might want to use? But like,
whatever,
as long as there's information there, it's fine. It looks vaguely familiar. It's fine. Continue. We'll move it on.
Love it. This is what people come here for. They're like, tell me what I should care about. Okay, so
we don't read the terms and conditions. We don't care
we're
about
just like automate.
Names.
We're just clicking automate.
Right?
There's a question in the chat from Grilled Cheese is, do you use Make as well? So I think the more interesting question is, does this apply to any automation tool out there, or is this Zapier specific?
I think it's probably pretty general. I think it's kind of like a programming language, right? Like the general philosophy of it, of like trigger and action are going to be the same in every tool. The tool might call them something different. And the buttons might be a little bit different, but they're going to be generally the same. I haven't used Make in a while since I had a different name. But yeah, very similar. And, there are pros and cons to both. But also I automate things because I'm trying to save time and be more efficient. And that means using the to some degree the tools that I'm most familiar with when that makes sense. And for me, that's Zapier.
Someone in the chat says we are point and click Python developers, and I couldn't agree more. We are point and click developers.
Absolutely.
So, and you're right that this applies to basically any automation tool out there. And we'll get into the pros and cons of Zapier versus other ones at the end. I do want to kind of get to the automation part. So we have our trigger, of which every automation has one. And then what is this action?
Okay, so the trigger is what's going to cause the action. So the action is like, okay, when X happens, what is Y? What do you want to happen? And in this case, we want Zapier to find that information that we just passed from Typeform. We want them to add it to Airtable. Right. So we're going to need to do really similar steps here. We're going to first add the app, which is Airtable, and prompted right there.
Never heard of Airtable.
So popular.
This is a first. I'm joking.
Yeah. So I think you've already saved just a step and connected, I think, your account.
Yeah,
so,
I did.
But okay, so this is a great example because whereas Typeform only had the one event, which is new record, Airtable has a lot. So these are all the different things you can use as an action in Airtable. So we can create a record, we can update an existing record, we can find a record, like we can do a whole bunch of stuff. But what we want to do is we want to make a new record. So we want to create records. And we'll select your account. Okay, and so to set up the action, we have to tell it what base to work on. So like what Airtable base within your account.
I have very many. So
I would imagine that you do.
So I'm going to search on Learn
I don't know
Zapier.
what this one's called. Learn Zapier. Okay.
Learn Zap. There we go.
There we go. Okay. And so then within a base, we have the tabs, which are tables. And so we're going to click submissions, which is the only one here. Okay. And so you so helpfully in the Airtable created the different columns for name, email, and sponsorship plan. And so Zapier automatically finds those. And that's why we have these fields. And so what we need to do is, so Zapier's like, okay, cool, you have these columns. What information do you want to go where?
Right.
And so we need to tell it, hey, this field in Typeform is the same as this field in Airtable. So like, this field where I get the name in Typeform, put it in the name box in Airtable, because tools are smart, but we're still a little bit smarter sometimes, maybe. So kind of, sort of.
Let me just, if I understand that correctly, we're saying these are the data that is kind of already in our Zap, right? So it's saying you can use the email, the name, and every time we're going to run this, it's going to go to that first trigger and say, okay, I want the name, right? So in the name, we want to map your name.
Correct.
Right.
And sometimes if there's a lot of data, Zapier can give you that little search, all available fields, and you can just type in like name. Like I know like when we use Stripe, like there's like so many.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. So same thing for email. I imagine I could just write out. No, I can't write it email because here it's just going to put the word email.
Yeah. And actually this is a really good call out, Aaron, because what you can do with email, so like where you're writing email right now, if you didn't want to insert data, if you just wanted to pass like a very set thing, like a word or number or whatever, you could just like manually put it in here and Zapier will pass the same thing every single time. So for example, a use case here is that in my actual Airtable, I have a column for sent of invoice, like invoice status. And so what I do in my Zap is I just pass the word sent. So instead of mapping a field here, I literally just would write the word sent. And so that when Zapier moves the data into Airtable, it starts with the word sent, so that we just like, that's our default status. So that's like a use case for that. But in this case, it's an email and we want an actual email. So,
so email
in the search box,
that.
There we go.
And then sponsorship plan.
Exactly. So I think you called it starter. Looks like maybe that field didn't have a name, but we know that because of the answer was starter, we know what it is.
Okay, great. So if people are interested, I do want to kind of let me know in the chat if you want to dig into this. I do want to talk about like the difference between inputting data, as you mentioned, like email and then potentially just dynamic data. We're just doing dynamic data for now, but let us know in the chat if that makes sense. So when now we have everything set up, we're essentially saying, put the name in the name field, put the email field in the email field. And I know it seems simple, but this is like, now that I don't work at Airtable, or I guess outside of tech, I have friends are like, this is a lot of people's job, is just like copy pasting information from one place to another.
Absolutely.
So let's go ahead and send that. Okay, so we're testing.
We're going to test the action just like we did before, where Zapier is saying, okay, this is the information kind of in its raw state without the pretty labels that we're passing. And it's saying that it was successfully sent. So we should be able to go to our Airtable and verify that.
Did not work.
Wait.
Interesting.
It didn't work.
That is interesting. Let me see why.
That is interesting.
Let me refresh here.
And we call ourselves experts.
I know. There we go.
Okay, there we go. We had to refresh. Okay.
See that? So it's weird because usually when Airtable has real time. So that was actually interesting. But very important. I think we deserve some confetti.
Yes, we do. I want the confetti. I'm excited for my confetti.
Absolutely. There you go. There you go. You've seen it. Now you've lived through it as a guest.
I have. It feels so good.
Okay. Well, very simple. Very simple. So now every time, let's turn the Zap on, which I think is like the biggest mistake that people make. So this is Typeform to Airtable submissions. I'm bad at naming things. And then so we've named it. Let's publish it. Turn on. Okay.
Yeah, and so I think another helpful piece of terminology while this is publishing is the word task. And so, because I've used it kind of in a various ways here, but so to kind of recap here, we have a Zap, which in this case, the Zap is really everything on this page. It's a set of instructions for when this happens, do this. We have our action that kicks things off, and we have our trigger that kicks things off, and then we have the action that does the thing. Every time this Zap runs, that will count as a task. And so this is important both for like pricing, because Zapier will charge based on how many tasks you have a month. This is what we were talking about at the beginning of the stream, you know, how many tasks I run every month now. And it's also helpful for troubleshooting, because you can see kind of like when was the last task that ran, and also cleaning out Zaps that are no longer used. Like if you can see that the last time there was a task was like over a year ago, like maybe you don't need that Zap anymore. Maybe you can clean it out. Do
you think it'd be worth going through and submitting the Typeform, seeing it in Airtable, and then showing that history, as an example? So how about we do that? So
let's do it.
Let me go back here. Let's refresh. And then my name is now Aron Jeff. I like Jeff as a test name for some reason. Feels like it's
I can tell.
Let's go Aron at AATT.
I used to use all kinds of crazy names. Like I used to use superheroes a lot. That was like the comic book nerd in me. And now I've started doing my last name as like the date, which I will say is very helpful from a test data perspective. Because now there's like in my stripes, for example, there's like Caro, July 5th. Caro, July 23rd.
I feel you.
Like,
this is very embarrassing. If you go to customers, I have like various levels of blah. Like blah 1 2 3 test 1 2 3, and you're right that the date would make a lot. Like I started doing like paid plan testing paid, so at least I have some context. But this seems like a universal problem of like I have one email but many tests I need to run.
Exactly. Yeah. And so sometimes the date's helpful when I'm like looking for I'm like, okay, I'm looking for today's date or yesterday's date. Or
come here to learn Zapier, but actually stay for the testing tips.
The testing naming convention.
Okay.
It only took me like 6 years to get there.
Well, we appreciate for cutting down that time for everyone else, but let's submit. Let's see what happens.
Okay,
so
let's do it.
Our Zap is on. Let's submit. So it just submitted. And if we go into, Typeform. Now, my understanding is that Zaps are not necessarily instantaneous.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So they can take a couple minutes, which is the bane of my existence, but great time to go to the bathroom or stretch or get yourself some water, stay hydrated, you know.
Okay, let's run it. Let's run it
manually.
Okay, no, this should be good. There's no run option, which is telling me that it should be near instantaneous.
Pretty instantaneous.
Let's go here.
Yeah, and so it'll depend on your plan and the apps that you're using.
Right. So let's go to history. Let's see if it's run. This is the stressful period where we don't know.
I know, right? Like fingers crossed that we know what we're doing.
Okay,
Now that we've like made it clear how easy this app is.
Hey, right. It worked. Okay, so it seems
Okay,
like it says it
great.
worked here. And
Yeah.
then if we go here, we see that it's there as well. So essentially, awesome. This is saying us that this is our one task, right?
Yeah.
So it's been run, and that's costing us one task in, you know, our plan limit. So I have about 1,000 more to go, which should last us till the end of the stream. Maybe not if I was tech ladies.
Let's hope so. We'll
not
see.
if I was tech ladies. Okay, so now we've done that part. Talk to us like that was the simplest Zap we could build.
Yeah.
What is like the next step in the onboarding that you were like, okay, this is the next thing that we automated?
Yeah. So I think this is a great time to talk about paths. So Zapier has a couple great built-in functionalities that really help you kind of like take it to the next level. So I think we can reopen that Zap and just build from there.
Okay. What is it that we're trying to do? What would be like the next step in the onboarding that you would say like, okay, well.
So the next step is that we would previously go into HelloSign, now I'm sorry, I think it's Dropbox Paper as of like this week.
Right.
So in Dropbox Paper, so like, you know, the first thing we did is like I made templates, right? So that we weren't manually uploading PDFs of contracts all the time and having to replace the little drop and drag boxes. But like even a template is kind of annoying because I have to like open up the website, I have to find the template, I have to input the email, I have to write that message, it's going to go in the body of the email, like all of those things. And so really wanted to automate this. This is one of those things that like took a little bit of time, but mainly just annoyed me as like someone who was trying to be efficient. So I think what we're going to try to do is automate sending the contract.
Right. So I am not a lawyer. I literally Googled like contract templates. So our goal here is going to be to add, you know, the name of the person and maybe a signature option here. Yeah. And ideally send it off to that person like, hey, you know, your contract is ready to sign, right? So this is a template in HelloSign, and we're trying to take that Typeform, put it into here and get it sent off to the client automatically, right? So I want the pro plan. They're like, I just submitted this form. This was so much fun. And they're like, boom, contract in your inbox. Sign it now.
Yes.
Awesome.
Exactly. Why you're excited. Let's do it.
Yeah.
But we're going to add one extra piece of complication, which is we have multiple plans and contracts need to say the name of the plan and the price.
Right.
And so instead of building two separate Zaps for the two separate plans, Zapier has a great option for paths. Okay. So what we can do is we can add another step here, the little plus sign, and the screen is a little blurry on my side.
That's okay. I've opened up actions and I'm searching for a path. Is that correct?
I think no, because it's not there we go.
Yeah, I've got paths open. It says path A and then path B.
So let's rename our path just to keep things simple. So let's rename the path and we'll call it like, I think you called them starter.
Yeah, starter and pro.
So let's name them that. And so basically what we're going to tell Zapier to do is like, we still wanted to have the trigger of the new entry in the Typeform, and we still wanted to take the action of creating the record in Airtable. But then based on that, we're going to send people down two different paths based on their answer to what plan they chose in the Typeform. So let's start.
So it's always, so let me just walk. So we're saying there's a path at the third step, but it's always going to run step 1 and 2. It's always going to say, okay, when there's a new entry, send it to Airtable. And we want to, in the starter path, that agreement that I just showed is what we want to send to that customer. Okay, so I go into edit that specific path, right? And it's asking me the name, which we've put up, which is starter. That's what I've called it. And it's asking me for rule setup and testing. So what is it? Is it at this moment asking us what should allow? When should we run this path?
Exactly. And so this is where we get to say, like, Zapier is basically saying, okay, when do I direct somebody down this path?
Got it.
And so there's quite a few options here. And so you can use the data that we already pulled in from Typeform or Airtable.
Right.
And we want to base it on their answer to the Typeform. So we're going to click the little down arrow next to new entry in Typeform so we can see all the data. And then we want to probably show all options because it looks like
Ah!
it's not showing.
Yeah, I got you. Show all options.
So we can see all of them, and we
Starter.
want, the answer to starter.
Okay. So
And so we're going to say we only want, basically only continue if, only go down this path with a certain set of data if the answer to the question that we just selected from the Typeform, and it'll give you a bunch of different options.
I want exactly
but we're going to say, exactly matches, and we'll say starter.
Okay, so we're essentially saying, okay, the rule for this specific branch, this specific path is only go down this path if the answer to the third question, which I should have named, which was a big mistake now, I feel like. If I could turn back time, I would. We can fix that after this one. So we're saying, okay, if the answer to the third question exactly matches starter, which is what we have here, starter, go down this path. And then I could potentially put other options, right? Like or, but we're going to keep it
you
simple.
can get really complicated with it. You could say only if they pick starter, and only if there was a question on the form that said they wanted to pay via invoice, or like you could do several different sets of criteria to get really smart about it.
Okay.
But I think we're adding enough new stuff to this stuff. We'll keep it simple.
Okay, so I'm doing continue. So it's essentially saying putting that rule into that path. And okay, so here it said your path would have continued because the submission we have in our current Zap as a test is, well, that's the only submissions we've had. So that makes sense, right?
Exactly. And and if it hadn't run, it might just be because we had picked Pro, in which case we would probably need to go back to the Typeform and put another test entry that picks Pro, but we'll do that in a minute.
Fantastic.
So the path works. And so just kind of like it is, outside of a path works the same way. It's got to have a trigger and it's got to have an action. So we did the trigger. It's when someone says that they want the starter plan. And so the action is going to be the Dropbox sign.
How's the browser on your end?
Looking clearer now.
Okay, good, good. So we're saying, okay, we're going to an action like before, essentially. We're just saying, but it's only going to run if the plan that the user selected is starter.
Correct.
Okay, so send. Oh, there's only one action. That's great.
There's only one, So send signature request from template, and so this does require that. Aron thankfully saved us a couple steps, and he added the contract to Dropbox sign as like a template, so that it's ready to go there. Okay, and so we just need to pick the name of the template.
You see, I'm so good at naming things. I remember that today I was like, this one is the test with a capital T. That's how I distinguish.
Oh my God.
And I have Staxi test, and I have stream template AATT, and then test. I don't even know what most of these are. I'm going to assume that
Did
it's
you just
test.
sign up for this tool, for this stream? Like, you've already got a couple templates in there.
So believe it or not, I actually have a whole stream on HelloSign, on webhooks, and Airtable HelloSign with my old boss, who was like, I'm tired of sending contracts. And that's where these three come from. What do those contracts have in them, and how do they work? I don't remember, but I have.
I'll let you go watch that stream. The webhook
No,
thing.
this is the same. This is actually, not the same. It's that one was unnecessarily complex. So I'm not on a paid plan. Okay, subject.
Okay.
So your tech ladies sponsorship contract. So this is a good example where we're saying that is always going to be the subject. There is no dynamic information here. Is that right?
Exactly.
Got it.
And this was one of my favorite things to automate, was this message. Because I had like a shortcut on my computer where I like would input the same paragraph, but it would be like, your contract isn't closed. Thanks for working with tech ladies, whatever. But I got so annoyed having to retype it all the time, or even just like use the shortcut. And so this is one of those things where it did save me time, but it also just like made my day better, because it didn't feel like I was wasting time retyping the same thing over and over. So this is a message that'll go in the email, and it's not dynamic text. It'll just.
But we can make it slightly dynamic, right? So I can say something like hi. I never know. Is hi like aggressive now? Should be like hello. Or,
I don't think so. No? I think you can do, or like hey, maybe it's most casual. Hey. Like hey, so and so.
Hey, smiley face. Yeah. Okay. Hey. And then we're going to step one. We're going to take the name. Hey, Aron.
Keeping it fun.
Yeah, absolutely. You can even put emojis in here, I think, if you're really wild.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's going to be sent. And this is being sent from Dropbox sign or hello sign. After signing, redirect
Yes.
URL. I don't know.
I don't use this.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like if you want to have like a thank you page with like next steps, I guess you could do that, but I've never used it.
Okay.
Okay. So title of the contract. This is one of those things that's like only really important for like organization on your back end. Just
Right.
like, and so I always just will call it like Tech Lady Starter contract or
Right.
like
Perfect.
that.
Okay.
Cool. And then, okay. We're not going to use any of the metadata stuff. And so this is, this is your permission to ignore this field. But we do need the customer's name.
Right.
And so the name that they put on the form is the name we're going to put on the contract. So we'd probably on the form too want to specify like full name, but for now, Aron's just going to be Aron. He's,
I'm universally known as Aron.
The Aron.
Exactly. Yeah. And then email, I guess, is important because that's where HelloSign is actually going to send the contract.
Yeah. And so you can go into new entry, Typeform, and then we'll find the email again. Continue.
Seems, okay. Start, okay.
Yeah. And so HelloSign is one of those tools that like in order to use the functionality of, Dropbox sign.
Yes, very important.
You do have to have a paid account. And so that's why it asks, do you have a paid account? And so since we're not using a paid account for this test, it will be a test contract that's like not legally binding, but that's fine.
That's even better actually, because I don't want to. I don't want to be.
You don't know what you're signing.
I'm not sure what this contract is.
Oh,
you must either upgrade to a
test.
paid. Okay, so do we want to upgrade? I'm happy to. So I'll let chat know. I'll ask chat. I'm happy to do another step here, and I'm happy to upgrade just to give it a run. And I think that's actually a good moment. So while I'm upgrading, I would love for you to maybe speak around the pricing of Zapier, how it works, and maybe its differences with other automation tools that you know. And I'm going to try to, as quickly as possible, enter my credit card here.
Okay. So Zapier recently changed their pricing actually. So I'm not as familiar with the new set of pricing. I think like 2 weeks ago, they did like their big user conference, App Connect, and changed the way some things worked and added some new features, which is cool. But basically a lot of the way that the pricing plans are structured is that it's going to be on how many Zaps you have, how many tasks you have. So how many times you're using those Zaps to send a set of data through. In this case, like how many people are filling out your Typeform and being added to Airtable. And then they also have now split up kind of their apps into like premium apps and like normal ones. And so some of them, in order to use like the really fancy ones, you have to have certain plans. So those are kind of like some of the main differentiators. And I think they're really just trying to separate people who are using it on like a smaller use case versus like building a whole business or team around it. Right. And so there's also some like permissions and stuff like that. But yeah, so that's kind of how the pricing is set up. And I think, it's definitely gotten more expensive. And it's one of those things where it still saves me so much time and has added so much revenue to my business that I'm like, that's fine. I'm pretty much happy to pay for it. It does make it a little harder to pay for it like on side projects before they've like made money,
Right.
And in like a personal Zapier account. But I think there's still just that whole like, okay, even if I could use another tool for slightly less money each month, like I'd have to like learn it. I'd have to move all my Zaps over,
Right. So they've locked you in, which is totally normal. But what would you say is like the biggest advantage of Zapier versus kind of other automation tools if you've used them? And I'm happy to like let me know in the chat if we have like Integromat or Make Users or Tray or anything like that. Let me come back here.
Yeah. I think that there's definitely some better options for like really heavy duty, like enterprise stuff, especially if you're going to get into like the low code world and like really want like sky's the limit. But I think the advantage of Zapier compared to a lot of the more like consumer ones is just like the breadth of the app directory, like how many apps it works with, and also just like the documentation and the size of the community.
Got it.
So like, there's just so many people using Zapier, writing about using Zapier. Like there's so much support out there for it that I think that that's a really big advantage. Although I will say with so many tools building in automations in their own tool, like Airtable is a perfect example of this. Now there's automations within Airtable. And I really try to keep the data as close as possible to
Right.
like its source. So it's like if I can automate something within Airtable, I'm trying to push myself to do that versus like introducing another tool in another place where things could break. So
Absolutely.
I do think that that's best practice for automation.
Yeah, I totally agree. Webflow also has logic now, and there are many other. I do agree with you that idea of like if the data lives in Airtable, I should automate from Airtable.
Yes.
I am now a paid user of HelloSign
Oh,
or a Dropbox Sign.
Felicia
Okay, so let's
David.
try that again. Let's see how quickly. So let me actually go
Okay.
back, and
Yes.
I am yes, or should I
Yes.
is yes?
Yes.
Okay, let's try that again. The things I
It
do,
used to be.
you know.
Yeah. Okay. I think that works. There used to be this thing where I had to put a number 1 in something, but maybe they got rid of that.
Let's see if this works. Use test
Oh.
mode 1 parameter. Oh, I see what's going
Okay,
on.
that is. You have to put in a 1. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a. I don't understand why this is, but if you go back to setting up actions, the screen is a little blurry for me, but there should be a field that's like test parameter where you can just like input the number 1.
Okay, let me check.
Okay. Wait,
Subject,
test,
redirect, metadata. But I am a paid.
You are.
There's no test.
So, I mean, maybe we need to refresh.
Yeah, let's try it again. Let's try to do.
Let's try refreshing fields.
Let's delete the. Like, could we? Oh yeah, just set up action, refresh field. Okay, here we go. Refresh fields.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see if we've got anything new.
Which is a great, just for anyone who's new, like refresh fields is great when you've like, oh, I need to add like a column to my Airtable, or I need to add another thing. Right. You can refresh fields and it.
Let's test that again.
Yeah.
No, I still get test mode equal 1.
Yeah, so I think because we're moving so fast through the screen is where I'm in. But yeah, there's this, I think again, like when you start using Zapier, you'll find some tools have these like quirks. And I remember that there's this quirk where I have to literally input the number 1 in one of these fields. But I thought they switched, like now like you can just say, yes, you're paid and that's fine. But
well, that's okay. Well, you know, we come to AATT and we break things, but this should work. Actually, let's try it one more time. Let me try to delete this step. And let's try to reconnect it again. I want this to work because I feel like this has a.
I'm also, while you're doing that, I don't know if I can do it fast enough, but I'm gonna look at my actual Zap where I'm doing
Go for
this
it. Yeah,
and see if I have a 1 lingering somewhere.
Okay. I'm sure it's gonna like so see it's assuming that I'm not on a paid plan. I want to test with the capital T. Let's go through see test.
Obviously the capital T.
Obviously. Let's go test here.
Okay, I'm in my live Zap. Let me see if I can.
Let's just send it to myself and see if that works. If not, what I can do is disconnect and reconnect the connection.
Oh yeah, this is exactly how I set up on my end.
Test mode equals 0.
Oh, okay. So yeah, we don't want that.
But there's no option in the action to not.
I feel like what they did, where it's like, is your plan paid? I think that used to be like, I think yes is. There we go. Wait, what's that one?
Go back. I have yes.
See no is 1.
I see.
Yeah. So yes is 0.
But it still won't let me send as a test, which is kind of weird.
Yeah, I wonder if it's because you just upgraded or something. Like if there's like a weird.
I actually think it might be because the API plan. I do not have the API on the plan that I purchased.
Oh, that's what it is. Sorry, that's what it is. Yes, because I have the API plan. But I'm looking at the Zap, and I can tell you this should, and it's really expensive. So yeah.
Oh, it's $100 a month. So that might be a little too rich for AATT's blood.
Fair enough.
But see, it says build and test the API for free, but it won't let me do a test mode equals 0. Okay. Oh, maybe I can just try it. Let's try it.
Yeah, if you go back to the Zap and you say like, well, yeah, if it didn't work when we had no either. Interesting.
Let me try
but I mean, I'm looking at my live Zap and we filled it out exactly the same way, and I have the API plan and it works. So
okay, well that makes sense. So if anyone folks are doing this again, we deeply apologize and make sure to buy the API plan. But know that it works. Yeah. So we'll share.
It does work. I promise.
Zap.
I've used it for like a year now. I promise it works.
Exactly. That's okay. I'm gonna go reach out to Dropbox and be like, yo, I teach you
Yeah,
guys
giving
enough. I
my
should
money
get a
back.
free plan.
Exactly. You should get a free plan to everything.
I'm actually on a test plan for literally everything folks saw today except Airtable. So we have 10 minutes here. I do want to kind of end not with another step, just because I think people will kind of get the, you know, the idea here, but what are your kind of tips for someone starting off in Zapier, and maybe some more advanced stuff that you kind of got into as you were more advanced in Zapier?
Yeah, I think some pro tips that I have here are to try to map out your like flow before you like start getting into Zapier.
Mm-hmm.
I think my instinct is always just like open up a new Zap and like start like going at it. But I think especially for like a complicated process, which oftentimes are some of the most like beneficial to like the business or your project or whatever you're working on, really require you to take a step back.
Right.
And so like in the case of this one where I went on to add, you know, adding a customer to Stripe and sending them an invoice and adding a bot to Slack that tells us when someone has filled out the form and also signed and paid and all the things. Like, you know, my paths have gotten really long, but it was like, I had to take a step back and think about like, okay, where does the data come in and like what order do these things need to be in? Like how many paths do I need? Like that kind of stuff. And I think especially when you're on like a business, doing this like for a team and for your team, like, you know, you're automatically going to become the default troubleshooter. Right. And so doing what you can to like make looms or documentation is going to save future you some trouble. And so I think those are some more of those like soft skill recommendations. But I would say like also don't be afraid to use not only paths, but Zapier has some other things that, you know, are a little more intermediate in terms of like filters, and ways that you can like clean up your data. And that I think can be like such a game changer, where you might think we're like, oh, but I don't want it to pass the name of the plan as starter, you know, or like maybe your trigger is like someone buys something on your website and your website has it kind of coded differently and you need to like rename it before you pass it in your action. Like Zapier will let you do that. Like there's some kind of Zapier apps that you can kind of add in the middle to clean up that data. And so I think that that's a great thing to play around with if you start to get in there and you're like, okay, a straightforward, you know, trigger and action aren't going to work for me.
So the two you mentioned there, format, which is saying, okay, I want to change the name, you know, numbers, text, maybe you want to capitalize something, you can do that natively, or something like, well, actually, it's not a path that actually, in our case, maybe a filter, just because we only built out one path, with saying, okay, this Zap only run the following steps, but it applies always, right? So it's not branching out. It's just saying we are not going to run for these. We are going to run for those. A very important question. What do you use to map out your workflows? Are you a pen and paper person? Are you a Miro? What is your tool of choice?
I'm a pen and paper person when it comes to Zaps, because I find that to be like the easiest, lowest friction way. But then I always drag them into, I'm super old school here. You can tell I've been doing this since like before like Miro is like really popular and like Figma and stuff. I'm in, I use Google Drawings actually. To just like map out kind of, and this is how I kind of onboard the team when I like announce a new Zap, like it's like a big one in the Slack, because I'm like, here's the screenshot of how it works. And then here's the Notion doc of like, you know, whatever. And then like here, and then that's a place for us to document edge cases too. And for me to be like, before you say something is broken, like here are two things to check, you know? So it kind of becomes like a living document. And I think setting that stuff up from the beginning is really important from a team, using Zaps on a team standpoint.
Absolutely. I've always dreamed of having this like little thing here that would be like record a loom that explains what this does. And funny enough, in Airtable, now we're just gonna take a tangent here. You can actually add Miro as an extension, right?
Oh, that's
so you can have your Miro boards like embedded into Airtable. There's also like a sync between the data and Miro, which is like sketchy at best, to be honest. But I don't work at Airtable. I can say that now.
You can say that now, yeah.
But the other thing that you can do is do a description block, which like
I feel like I'm really bad at using like the description blocks even built into Airtable that say like, what does this Airtable do? And,
right.
like, I'm
Yeah. And
not,
so one of the
I
things,
got to
like you
get
can have
better
a
at that even.
Loom, walkthrough of the
Uh-huh.
base. And so here you can link whatever documentation you have, and same thing in
Very
interfaces, which I think is even more powerful as folks who are like, oh, I've never been in Airtable before. What is this interface?
Yeah.
You can have like a button or a URL that says like, interface walkthrough, super, super important. And I just wish that like, it would just be here, right? Just like,
Yeah.
give me a
Just
little,
like all in one place. Like, don't make me switch tabs. Don't make me like open another website and log
exactly,
in. Like,
exactly. Well,
yeah.
that's a call to, to entrepreneurs everywhere. Please build us
Right.
a little hack that we can add information into Zapier.
Yeah.
So Colleen,
Actually, I just tested a new tool last week for some folks that I'm hoping might solve this problem for us. I don't know if you started to use Switchboard,
I have
but
not,
they're
but I
building
know
out some pretty
Philip.
cool stuff for us. Yeah. They're building out some pretty cool stuff, and so I'm like excited to be a power user of it.
Oh, fantastic! Well, once
Yeah.
you and Philip feel like it's in a good spot, I would love to come here and show it off. Yeah. I agree, Isman. If we can have it all integrated into the same screen, it'd be great.
Right.
So Philip, go out, be an entrepreneur, build it, and come back. Well, Caro, it was a huge pleasure to have you. A real honor. I hope that this was enough to get people started on Zapier. Pending we know that the hello sign thing works. So if you do want to copy, make sure you're on the API plan. But for folks who want to learn either more about tech ladies, want to ask you automation questions, or just hang out with you because you're an awesome person, where can they kind of hang out? Where can they reach you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter most frequently. So I am Caroline Syrup, like the breakfast condiment, on Twitter. And that's also my website, carolinesyrup.com. I'm Caro Griffin on LinkedIn, but hiretechladies.com is the Tech Ladies website. So if you're a woman in tech, come join us. And yeah, would love to have you.
Absolutely. Well, Caro, it was a huge pleasure. Thank you so much for coming. Know that you are now a viewer and an official guest of Automate All the Things.
Exciting.
And I will let you know how many hours people are watching and learning Zapier and making, automating all the things. It was a true pleasure to have you. Thank you so much again. Thank you, Colleen, Isman, everyone who joined in the chat or just watching. Hopefully you learned something. And I'll be off next week for Webflow Conf. If you're joining Webflow Conf, I would love to see you. Come hang out in person. It's going to be super exciting. And then I'll be back in 2 weeks with Varun and Clay.io. But Caro, thanks again. And I will talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good luck with your Zaps, everybody.
All right. Have a great day, y'all. Bye, everyone.
Bye.